There we go.
Okay. So I will turn this over to Robin now, who will introduce our three presenters. And then again, feel free to type questions into chat that we will present to the panels afterwards.
Thank you so much, Kay. We're so pleased to have everybody today. And before I introduce our three panelists, I want to let you know that this program is being recorded and it will be posted on the League's website within 2 weeks. So please share that program for people who might be interested. As Kay mentioned, I have just posted the contact information for the League and Diné College and the trusted resources in the chat box. So you've got the websites and phone numbers. And today the format for our program is to spend about half of our time in a moderated discussion with our three panelists. And then we're going to open the program up to a larger conversation with the panelists through your questions and answers. And so now I'm going to have the pleasure to introduce our three panelists, and I'm going to do it alphabetically. So let me stop share here. And so our first panelist is Crystal Cree. Crystal Cree is the Director of Legislative Affairs and Special Projects for the Office of the President at Diné College, where she directs and coordinates legislative affairs on behalf of the college with the Navajo Nation government, state legislatures, both Arizona and New Mexico, and federal government offices. With the help of the Arizona Secretary of State's Tribal Liaison and Outreach Coordinator, Crystal has co-hosted several voter education sessions with student panels in the Navajo Nation with Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs. Crystal also serves on the board of the League of Women Voters of Northern Arizona. Next, we have Patty Hansen. Patty currently serves as the Coconino County Recorder. She was elected to that position in 2012 and re-elected in 2016 and 2020. Patty's worked in the field of elections and voter registration administration for 34 years. During that time, she's worked for Lancaster County, Nebraska, Ramsey and Hennepin counties in Minnesota, and the Minnesota Secretary of State's office. In 2003, she was appointed to be the Coconino County Elections Administrator and served in that role until elected to be the county recorder. Patty served on numerous national and state task force covering a wide range of election topics. She's regularly asked to speak to national election organizations about the importance of Native American voter outreach programs and providing language assistance to minority language voters. Patty's also served as a past president of the Arizona County Recorders Association and is currently on the board of directors for the Arizona Association of Counties. She's a certified elections register administrator through Auburn University and the Election Center, and an Arizona certified election administrator. Lastly, Patty is a strong advocate for striking down barriers to voting and expanding the voting franchise. And our third panelist is Leslie Hoffman. Leslie Hoffman was appointed to serve as the Yavapai County Recorder by the Board of Supervisors on New Year's Day 2012 after 23 years in the title industry. In November 2012, Leslie was elected to the office by the voters of Yavapai County and was re-elected in 2016 and 2020. The recorder oversees the maintenance of the county's voter registration rolls, in-person early voting, and sending ballots to all voters on the active early voting list. More about that later. Additionally, the recorder is responsible for recording documents and preserving them as permanent public records. Leslie is the immediate past president of the Arizona Association of County Recorders, current president of the Arizona Association of Counties, a member of the election officials of Arizona Election Center, sits on the National Association of Counties, Finance, Pensions, and Intergovernmental Affairs Steering Committee, and is on the Circle of Advisors for the National Vote at Home Institute and Coalition. Leslie is also an Arizona Certified Elections Officer and holds a national certification, Certified Elections Registration Administrator through the Election Center in Auburn University. We are so proud and happy to have these three experienced, very busy women be our panelists today. And we thought before we started our moderated panel, it would be interesting to know a little bit about these women in terms beyond their official biography. So I've asked each person to spend a couple of minutes just sharing a little bit about their personal remarks, personal background. And is it okay if we just go alphabetically and start with Crystal? Is that okay? Crystal, if you would just a few personal introductory remarks, we'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Robin. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Crystal Cree, and I work here at Diné College as the Legislative Affairs and Special Projects Director. I'm from Tuba City, Arizona, and I grew up here on the Navajo Nation. And for those, just to properly and respectfully introduce myself, and I have been working closely with students over the past couple years and trying to get them more involved in civics and being a part of and expanding their voice in voting and participating in our own Navajo Nation elections as well, and getting involved and being contributors to the community. So this is what stemmed out of that effort to expand voter education and outreach to our students by students, as well as try to expand our outreach to the local community, and as a whole work with other partners to reach the rest of the Navajo Nation that spans across 3 counties here in Arizona. And just a correction earlier, Diné College is the first tribally controlled college. However, there are 37 tribal colleges across the United States. So I just wanted to share that information. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I appreciate it. Patty?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Robin and Kay and Marianne and the League of Women Voters for inviting me here today. Just a little background about myself. I was born and raised in Texas and Missouri. So, and as you can tell, I'm older, so I can remember, unfortunately, the days of segregation growing up in Texas, and that influenced me, I think, a great deal. And so that's what kind of persuaded me to go into politics and then into election administration. I moved here to Flagstaff 17 years ago and have loved living in this beautiful, diverse county. It's not only beautiful scenery, but I love the diversity of our and culture, the different cultures of the people living in our county. So I look forward to visiting with you about elections. I've been lucky that I've spent the majority of my adult life being able to work in a field where I have a great deal of passion and have enjoyed. And I really appreciate the work that the League of Women Voters does and has done and continues to do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. And Leslie Hoffman, please.
Hello. I was just looking at some of the questions you sent. My family came here in 1961. So I've been here for most of my life. And yeah, I got into this business because I was in the title industry, and my predecessor I had known since high school. Now we are a small area, and she went into the title business. I was in the title business, and then she moved over to the recorder's office. And when she decided to retire to take a different position at the county, she reached out to me and said, "I think you should apply," because at the time it was midterm, and so I would have to have been appointed. And I had always been intrigued with politics. I was very good friends with our then mayor and the current and the previous mayor. So I always was interested, and I knew the recording side of the house. So I came into a fantastic staff. They are absolutely amazing, and they were the ones who brought me up for the last 10 years and worked together to, again, do everything we can to make sure people get their vote. We always say there's no blue, there's no red, everybody here is beige. We try to make sure everybody can vote if they want to, and we're open, our doors are open all the time. And I absolutely love doing the talks with the league. We always have such great participation, and appreciate you helping us get good information out.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Again, we're just honored to have the three of you here today. What I'd like to do is pose a question, and then whoever wants to start the conversation, please do, and we'll just kind of go from there. We're so honored today to have Crystal, who's been involved in outreach with the Navajo Nation, and I know the Yavapai Apache Nation is in Yavapai County. So to kind of give us an overview, can you explain the jurisdictional relationship between the Navajo and the Yavapai Apache Nations and your office and or your work, so that we can have an understanding of what that is about?
Well, I can start with in Coconino County, prior to when I came, in fact, I think it was previous recorders back, started a Native American outreach program in Coconino County. And we have been lucky to be able to work with the Navajo Nation. The three counties work closely with the Navajo Election Administration and the Navajo Nation's administration they've developed, all of us, a Navajo language election glossary. So the terminology used across the nation, whether it's in the three counties in Arizona or in the three states, New Mexico and Utah, it's the same terminology that's used. So because they're constantly updating the glossary because of new things coming about in regards to elections. I remember when we moved away from punch cards to optical scan, there was a lot of new terms that needed to be defined as to describe optical scan equipment, like the word oval. It's we tell people to color in the ovals. Well, how do you do that in Navajo to be consistent? We also have the two villages of the Hopi tribe. We have a band of the San Juan Paiutes, and we have the Havasupai Nation at the bottom of the Grand Canyon in their village. And we work closely with those tribal governments too, to make sure that the people living there get the information they need to be able to vote. So the main thing that we have found in the 2020 election, we were very lucky in that we had constant communication with the Navajo Nation to coordinate everything. And this was coordinated through the Secretary of State's office. So the challenges of working, and I'm sure Crystal can talk about this, is the Navajo, the Diné language is not a written language. So there's different challenges in regards to education and providing information to our Navajo citizens.
Thank you, Patty. Leslie?
Yeah, we also have the Yavapai Nation, which is about 2 miles from my office, maybe not even that. And I know a lot of them. I went to school with a lot of the people that are there, but it's very small tribe. And when they have information or they need information, they give me a call. Most of them have my cell number, I'm pretty sure. So we don't have really large demographics, large areas like Patty does. Patty's my hero because she's got so many different challenges from the different nations to the Grand Canyon to deal with. And then over in the Verde, we have the Yavapai Apache over there. And we reach out to them, and they're very independent. But what really helped us is we were talking to some staff over in the Verde. One of the girls that the treasurer's office used to work for me. And we said, we've been trying to get a hold of someone. We want to put a new Dropbox because they like the Dropboxes there in the nation. And she said, well, my son-in-law's on the board. So that has really helped us open up communications with them. And we're able to get new Dropbox over there. And they're very independent. We don't have near as much interaction as Patty does with her nation.
Okay.
But we're always there for them. And like I say, so many of them know us and people in the office. If they have questions, they call, and we're so close to all the vote centers. We've asked them if they needed vote centers or early voting, and they're completely happy with what they have as of now, but we continue to reach out just to make sure that they know that we're thinking of them and we're willing to do whatever is necessary.
Thank you, Leslie.
Welcome.
Crystal, you can probably educate me. I think the nation extends at least over 3 counties, Apache, Coconino, and Cochise counties. Can you speak to any particular challenges or opportunities that you've seen looking back or looking ahead to the elections coming up?
Crystal, did you want to?
So when you say nation, are you referring to the Navajo Nation or one of the other tribal
The
nations?
Navajo Nation.
The Navajo Nation. Yeah, sure, Patty, I can start this. Just like Patty said, our language is not written. However, we do have a system for writing it, if that makes sense, but it's not official. There's still talks amongst our traditional knowledge holders on how to actually spell certain words, but we get by. If you didn't know this already, my brother actually sits on the Secretary of State. He's a tribal liaison there, and he's fluent in Navajo and writes it very well. And that's probably who you may have worked with to try to get some of these election materials translated to Navajo. But I think that effort is really awesome and good. And this is speaking to Robin's current question about, the next election coming up. Many of these materials often go to people, are made for people who are only fluent in Navajo and only understand Navajo. And they may understand bits and pieces of English to get by, but many of these fluent speakers don't even read Navajo, if that makes sense. So that material, although it's seen as beneficial, I think it's great, to help assist in for those who do read and write Navajo, but traditionally along the same lines of, it wasn't written. Most people are taught just to speak it, not to read or write it. However, there is a good amount of people who do read it. For opportunities for Navajo Nation, I think what has been great is what Patty mentioned about Coconino's Native American Outreach Plan. And I noticed, there is a couple of Navajo citizens who sit on, their outreach committee and, direct that. So I think that's great, including people who are from the community to expand voter education to the Native community. And one thing within Native communities, as Leslie mentioned, Yavapai is very independent. So they prefer to speak to somebody who is from their tribe, from their neighborhood, from their community. And I think that's the way to go in working with these a county recorder's office. One thing I've seen with Navajo and Apache County, not too many materials were available in the last election when we tried to do our outreach through our students, and just to have the information on hand, and especially so with the Apache County recorders at the time. And I believe at that time it was Edison Winika who was the county recorder, and we couldn't even get a call back. And when we did get a call with somebody, they said, you need to speak to this person, but they couldn't even assist us with any information. And, that was frustrating for some of our students to see that. And just imagine for someone who really does want to get their vote in, that they can't find their polling place. Some of the polling places that they traditionally went to weren't available in the last election. So we had to communicate. I know there was workers on the ground. Luckily, we have many Navajo women out there, as well as other citizens who have been on the ground working to try to connect some of our elders who speak only Navajo or are not too familiar with what we call the state election. They just know of the election date, but they don't know of the parameters around, different changes that may have happened or different laws that may have taken place. And with the pandemic at that time, it really got people to try to submit their ballot by mail. However, for some families, it was scary to just even go to the post office and check their mail. So, we had to make sure that there was education to them that, they are these polling drop-off sites. Unfortunately, I don't believe that's available anymore here within Arizona, or not going to be available in the next election. And as well as, handing or collecting ballots from family members, they would have, for example, what we call runners here on Navajo Nation. And within the Navajo Nation with families, we have multi-generation families living in one home. So to lessen the risk of exposure to COVID, they would have one runner who would run to the store and get food, and for the whole household, and the whole household would stay, but this runner would go out and get food or check the mail or go pay the bills. And just the same as, with the voter outreach, you would have one runner who would collect everyone's ballots and turn it in. So, and we just wanted to make sure, with some of this voter education, with some of these polling places being closed, we hope that we can in turn educate some of these county recorders of the struggles, because sometimes they're not there on the ground seeing what we see. So I think it's a partnership that needs to be built up. Maybe it went on hiatus for the last election, but hopefully we can work together with some of the county recorders to try to lessen some of the barriers that are created for voters out there on the Navajo Nation.
Thank you, Crystal. You pointed out a number of things, and I think we're going to have some questions looking ahead about, as you suggested, what other things can be done to improve access and registration going forward. I'm going to go ahead and ask about changes that were made this past year that I guess went into law concerning voting in Arizona, voting registration. I understand there were over 100 bills last year, a few of them passed. And the question is, how will voters be impacted by these changes in voting laws? And how do you plan to get the word out to the voting public? So what are the changes, and then how are you going to get the word out and the impact?
I'll start with getting the word out. That's the easier part. We do PSAs, and we've already picked up a lot of them because our media, we have a great relationship with our media. So when we send PSAs on different changes and things to look for, they're really good. They love to have little fill-in snippets. and we put stuff in the newspaper, and now our community is starting to invite us back out again. And so we can have that personal contact. We've gone to multiple meetings in just the last month. So we are out there. And that's my preferred way, because I feel like this last year we lost that personal touch. They're used to us speaking to them. They can, we sit right in front of them, they can talk to us face to face. And I think with a lot of the media, a lot of stuff that was said and passed around last year, a lot of this misinformation would have been tampered down a little bit if we could have been sitting face to face with people other than on the phone. It just makes such a difference. As far as laws, we've had a lot of the laws that they passed, we already do. They're just codifying laws, just saying that we can't send the ballot to anybody if they don't request it. Well, we already do that. The missing signatures, not calling after 7. That was already in the procedures manual. So a lot of the laws that were passed, we were like, okay, that's fine. We do it anyways. We're following those procedures. The ones that will affect is they'll see on the envelopes, secure envelopes now, that if a ballot comes to someone's address and the person does not live there anymore, there's a box that they can check saying return to the postal service. Hopefully, I don't know that people will, most of the time they'll just throw it away, because like extensions on return mail, people don't put in a forwarding mail address. It'll keep coming to that return address, or to that old address. And so we're trying to encourage people to send them back so that we know they've moved and not just throw them away. And that was actually a good law. Even if a handful of people will do that, that'll be really good. Of course, no private funds. Cities and towns now, for anybody that's on from cities and towns, they passed a law that you can do your own election training for the clerks. A lot of the clerks and their assistants go through the Secretary of State certification training class. Now they can do their own. It just has to be approved by the Secretary of State. Oh gosh, there were so many. You'll be able to get, any of you that are doing petitions, now a PO box can be put on a petition due to one of the candidates last year. Her husband was a judge, and when she turned in petitions, she put a PO box on it because they have a protected address. So our voters will be seeing that. They won't necessarily see, on some of them, see their residential address. We also have the 1485. That was probably the most contested one out there. So that if a person must use their mailed ballot once in a 4-year cycle, or else they're removed from the early voting list, not from the voter rolls, but from the early voting list. And it has to be complete cycles, and because the legislature didn't close until really late, no one would even get a notice until 2027. So who knows what that law will look like by the time we get to 2027. Then that's when the first notice would go out. Patty, do you want to talk about a few others?
Well, the one you mentioned, the one that I'm the most upset about, and it's going to affect voters, but they're not going to know it affects them. That's the law that says we cannot accept private grants from private or nonprofit organizations. Coconino County received a $614,000 grant in 2020 from the Center for Technology and Civic Life. And that money came without any strings attached. It was to be used for education and to improve the election process. And here in Coconino County, we did drive-up, drop-off voting because of COVID. And also on the Navajo Nation, because so many people that had not voted by mail before were choosing to vote by mail because of COVID, we wanted to make sure those envelopes were signed. And also if they needed language assistance. So the drive-up voting really helped us a lot on the Navajo Nation. We expanded drop boxes. In fact, we had 27,000 of our early ballots were returned by being dropped in a drop box. And we were able to run English ads countywide. In the past under the Voting Rights Act, we've always run Navajo language ads for our voters that are not fluent in English. But for the first time, we were able to run ads in English, and that really helped with education countywide. We had not been able to do that. And we bought what we call our voting trailer, which we will use at events and drive to the rural parts of our county. As you know, it's quite large. And so we'll be able to set up early voting at remote areas in the county, also conduct voter registration drives at events. So cutting that income, we are really concerned how it's going to affect us in 2022, because all of these things we needed to hire extra staff people for, and that just takes money. And without that, I'm very concerned. I know our tax dollars are limited, and it just makes no sense to me why having money that comes with no strings attached is a bad thing. We set record turnout. We had record voter registration. And a lot of this, I think, was thanks to what we were able to do, and also the organizations and the groups in Coconino County that were able to get that information out to people. So that's the one that I think hurts the most. Now, we do a voter guide every 2 years in even years. And under the National Voter Registration Act, we're required to clean up our list. And the way we've chosen to do it is to mail a mailing to all registered voters. Well, starting in 2016, we turned that mailing into a voter guide that contained all sorts of voter information. And we have received very positive feedback on how valuable that is. And with redistricting this year, a lot of people's districts are going to change. So we'll be including in there the maps and information about the new districts. So that we can keep doing. We regularly budget for that. And because it's required under the National Voter Registration Act, we have to do that mailing. And we've really, we're able to turn it into an education piece instead of just a voter list cleanup piece. So
I'm going to ask the question of funding, but I want to ask Crystal. Crystal, do you see any changes in the law differentially impacting youth, people on the in the nation?
Yes, I do. So there's 3 that come to mind in particular with Arizona. I haven't done too much research on the New Mexico side. However, in 2021, Arizona passed 3 main laws that hindered Native American rights to vote. As you may know, on the reservation, a lot of us get our mail by way of postal box. So we vote by mail. That's like the primary version of voting for us. That's our number one action in voting. So for example, I'll share one example. Myself, I have to travel 3 hours to get to my polling place. And luckily, you know, my supervisor understands, our employer understands, and they award a certain amount of time for you to go vote. But for me, I have to travel 3 hours just to submit my ballot. So if I was one of the ones that were probably purged by SB 1818, then, you know, then I would have to, and I wouldn't know if I was taken off that list. I would have to be diligent in making sure that I'm still a registered voter. And then, you know, what if I was left off that list? I traveled 3 hours to submit my ballot, and yet, you know, I'm faced with barriers there. And on the Navajo Nation in the deep northeast part of the state where you have Cove, Arizona, Red Mesa, East Nas Bus, those are right at the border of New Mexico. And oftentimes, in addition where I live, which is Saley, Arizona, there is not much help that is given to these areas to in voter education. We didn't even know some polling places were closed down, or we couldn't submit our votes there. For example, they would use the local chapter houses most of the time. And there was no information shared about where our next voting place was. Luckily, I was able to drop off my mail-in ballot, but I still had to travel at least 30 minutes to the next town to submit that ballot. So just sharing some of those personal barriers that were already there prior to these laws being passed. Now it's going to be even more difficult. And I hope that, with the outreach and with the education that we can partner on, we can lessen some of those barriers and work against them to get as many voters as we can out there from these Native American communities.
Thank you. Cycling back to funding for a minute, Patty, you brought up the additional private grants, and can you explain how your office is funded, and do you have enough funding? It sounds like you don't, but can you explain how, as each county recorder has the same formula for how they're funded? Can you just explain that? And
Okay, sure. We're funded through the county general funds. So the county, we submit our budget, and it's part of the budgeting process for the entire county. And there's not enough money to go around for everything, whether it's our health department, our sheriff's department, it's all competing interests. I've been very lucky in Coconino County that our county supervisors have funded us as much as they can. But this extra money, I don't know how we would have got through COVID without it, to tell you the truth. As Crystal mentioned, the chapter houses were closed, some of them. We have found in Coconino County that we try to co-locate our polling places on the Navajo Nation at the chapter houses, because the Navajo Nation is conducting their elections at the same time. And we don't want voters to have to go to one location to vote in the Navajo Nation and another location to vote in our elections. So we used it to we rented some tents and actually had voting going on outside in tents. So those were the kind of things that we were able to do. I think I'll just mention, I'm a big advocate of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. With striking down pre-clearance, it has allowed counties to close polling locations. And in Coconino County, we have worked very hard not to close any polling places in the rural parts of our county, and specifically on Native American reservations, because it is an issue. We don't want to make it that it's so difficult to vote. And that's why the expanded early voting is so important, like with the trailer, to get there, even to get to your chapter house, maybe a 30-45 minute drive or an hour drive. It's not close, just like off the reservation. We have rural parts of our county that it's a long drive, to get to any polling places, and especially when your county's the second largest geographically in the United States. So now we have to rely on government funding only. And it's through, now there was some money through the CARES Act. I think Leslie might want to mention on that. I'm sure they asked for money through the CARES Act federal funds, but it is very rare for us to get any kind of funding outside of what the county budget can give us.
I just want to make a clarification on what you said, Patty. Are you saying that it's up to each of the counties to fund the election department? Is it strictly county funding? Is it up
Yes.
to the county?
It's up to the county. We're all county offices, whether it's the recorders or the election office.
Okay. Leslie or Crystal, do you want to add anything to funding? And Crystal, I'd be interested in, I know you're one person and you have a big nation there. Are you familiar, were there private grants used, or is that something that you're looking forward in the next cycle to go after private grants?
Honestly, I have not considered looking up grants. Right now, I think our new county recorder for this area and the communities I mentioned is Larry Noble. And I haven't seen much action from that office. And honestly, I'm still trying to facilitate how we would go about working with him more and their county recorder's office in general. And honestly, I think it's great the way Patty has run the Coconino, her job on that side. And I appreciate that for that community and my home community, which is on that side, which is Tuba City. And I think I would love to see how that could be reflected within some of the other county recorder's office, mainly here in Apache County. However, to answer your question, no, I have not considered that, or have not. I'm not sure if I'm in a position to say anything of where the election funding goes. However, I think as a voter or a constituent in this that lives in this area, I think it's something we can definitely bring up with other outreach coordinators, and maybe even with our own nation leaders here within Navajo Nation on how they can work closely with Apache County and trying to make sure there are sufficient funds given to run an effective election and make sure that our citizens in this area are given the same opportunities that other counties are given.
Okay, thank you for sharing your perspective. Leslie, did Yavapai County, were they able to use grant money the last time around, or?
We used the CARES money. We didn't get into the CTCL grant money that Patty was talking about, because I would have done something similar. I'm very jealous of her trailer because we're big too. We're not as big as Coconino, but we have some real rural areas that our dream was to go during the early voting time, during the early voting period, go like 2 days in Congress and 2 days in Baghdad, some of these places that are way out. But we did not get that. Where we did benefit is we got the CARES funding, so that helped us so much with the PPE, buying extra sanitation stations. And then the Secretary of State actually offered to buy drop boxes for any counties that wanted them. And we're the drop box queens in Yavapai. We are up now to 19, and we were able to put those drop boxes in those rural areas. 80% of our people are on the early voting list. So we had 87% turnout, and like 95% were the early ballots for the general election. So the drop boxes were huge for us to put in smaller communities with some of the CARES money that the Secretary of State offered us for pushing those. And it also built some really great goodwill to these smaller communities so they didn't feel left out. They loved it. Now libraries and courts and fire departments, so volunteers, they jumped right in to be a part of the whole process. Yeah, I echo Patty. I'm very sad that we're not going to be able to get, because we never get grants. There's money, there's grants for health, there's grants for law enforcement, there's grants for education. Giving grants for elections, hard to come by.
Okay, I'm just checking in. I don't see any questions in the chat box. And again, if you've got questions, please put them in. But I think we'll just continue with our panelist questions until we get some questions dropped in. How does that sound? Okay.
Okay, you're muted. Unmute yourself, please.
Mary Ann, you submitted a couple of questions. Would you like me to read those for folks, or they were
Well,
directed to me?
I guess I can answer them myself because the cat's out of the bag. I asked them. Okay, so I had a couple of questions. First of all, if a new voter wants to get on the mail ballot list, can they use the existing Pebble form, or will there be a new Evel form? If someone turns in a Pebble form, is that going to be rejected, or can we still use that when we register people?
I would not reject it. If they're asking the registered voters, they're on their registered voter, we're going to look at that signature. I would never reject for that. That's, to me, that's crazy.
Great, thank you.
My husband, so I'm not too.
And then I noticed in the chat that you have a new election department starting up in Coconino. So Patty, my question to you, is Coconino going to try to move toward vote centers, or are you still going to keep the specific polling places like you've had in the past?
Thank you for that question. We have been using vote centers. We are a hybrid county, is how we would say it. We have 3 vote centers in the county: the Flagstaff Mall, NAU Sky Dome, and the Tuba City High School. And we are looking at, I think we will expand definitely one more vote center. But why we're a hybrid, because we are so large geographically, the only place really vote centers would work is in an urban area, because you're not going to have a vote center, at Supai Village at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, because the only people there are going to be people who live there. So we're a hybrid one. Now, one thing we did do this year that a lot of people, I don't think, realize, we have new accessible voting equipment. And it's what it does is you vote on a touchscreen, but it prints out a paper ballot, and then that's put in the ballot box. Well, what we have now is, if you go to the wrong polling place to vote, you're given the option of being able to vote there, your correct ballot on the express vote, or you can decide to go to a vote center or your correct polling place. And we went down and I looked 2 years ago, we had to reject 154 provisional ballots, because if your name's not on the list, we would have you vote provisional. And if you went to the wrong polling place, your name's not on the list, so we'd have you vote a provisional. This year, because of this new option, we only had to reject 1 provisional ballot for voting at the wrong polling place. And that was a person who was unhappy, insisted when they were told, I'm not going to vote on that touch screen and I'm not going anywhere else to vote. And so my thing is, you can't cure stupid sometimes. So we had to reject that 1 ballot, but we found a solution to a problem. So essentially, it's not really a true vote center, in that we can't say they're vote centers because we only have 1 touch screen at each location. And with a vote center set up like what Leslie has in Yavapai, you don't know who's going to show up at what vote center. And we could possibly have long lines or that, but we cured our problem of people going to the wrong polling place and not being able to vote. So.
Thank you. And then I did have one other question for Crystal. I heard James Sita Peshlakai speak at another program about the challenges of post office boxes for the Navajo Nation. And are there things that can be done to help mail balloting, like could temporary mail carriers be hired? Because as you know, you can't harvest ballots. You can't pick up a ballot for someone outside your own family. And I think it's possible that there may be no fee post office boxes for people who don't have home delivery. And Senator Peshokai mentioned that people who, if it comes down to buying food or paying for your post office box, you're going to let your post office box lapse. So I'm wondering if that's a potential option on the Navajo Nation.
If the hiring more postal workers would be the solution? I'm not sure.
I'm just trying to think of, I know your nation relies heavily on mail balloting, and it's very challenging. Are there ways that temporary postal workers could be allowed to pick up ballots from people to avoid this issue of ballot harvesting challenges? And, can people get free PO boxes if they don't have home delivery?
I see. I think those are two great ideas. However, looking at, possibly having some of these people pick up some of these ballots, just to give you an idea, we have people traveling maybe even 2 hours just to check their postal service box. And, in this community for Saline, you don't necessarily have to pay for your Saline box year after year. All you have to do is pay once, and then you'll have that running. I'm not sure if that's across the whole board for all postal boxes here on the nation, but just given that, just scaling in that understanding, if you hire one person just to travel 2 hours to get one ballot, I'm not sure if the state would see that as feasible or the federal government would see that as feasible. I think what worked good for us was a family member collecting them and then one person running to drop them off. Unfortunately, I don't believe we can do that in the next election. For temporary, I think some of those solutions, like you stated, with one person going to the home, I think that will work with communities like Tuba City. There is a high population. There's neighborhoods where you actually live right, maybe within 20, 30 feet of somebody. But out there in the rural communities like here in Saline, my physical address isn't even recognized. I would have to use the school's address. So if someone were to come on site and pick up my ballot, I would have to give very detailed directions on where my house is located. Although it is employee housing, that is just right there. Even that is not recognized by federal databases as a physical address. I would have to use the main college's address. And you wonder how much more barriers you would create in trying to find these solutions. And I think the thought is there on what could be beneficial, on what solutions we can create. But it's disheartening to see how some of these solutions were there, but they're suppressed now. So just sharing that thought, but and sharing some insight on how it really is. Yeah, it does seem like a good idea, but in the real world, it may not be so beneficial to us.
Thank you, Crystal. It's a really good explanation of the challenges. And somehow or other, a question went to me, Kay, so I think I'll just read that.
Okay, great.
If you cannot gather ballots in areas that are so spread out, and the voters may not be able to travel to vote, are they just not able to vote?
If I can just add, there is a state law that allows the recorders to send special election boards out. And we did that. We had several special election boards where people of opposite political parties went to people's homes who weren't able to get out and we assisted them with voting or picked up ballots. Also, the Secretary of State this time coordinated with the Apache, Navajo, and Coconino County recorders, and we worked with the post offices. There's a problem here in Arizona where they're shutting down distribution sites or regional sites. And so like our mail now in Flagstaff goes to Phoenix and then back up. In Apache County, we found out that some mail from a lot of locations went to Albuquerque and then back to Apache County Recorder's Office. So we worked with the post office so they would hold any of those early ballots, and the 3 county recorder's offices went to those the postal offices like in Flagstaff and Show Low and Albuquerque actually, and they held our ballots for us. So we picked them up, and then we worked between the 3 counties to deliver them to the correct county so it would arrive in time. But as I'm sure all of you are aware, right now, the cuts that had been made to the post office and closing of places is really concerning to those of us in elections. And Leslie, serving on the Vote at Home organization, Leslie's been a huge advocate for us in regards to being able to vote by mail. And she may have information to add on that.
There I am. I wish I had more to add to that. We did the same thing, but we're not tasked with the large rural on the nation. You have to know where you're going. I think that's kind of what Crystal was saying too. It makes it such a challenge because they don't have the street signs. You have to know that area. So we're not challenged with that, but we do have boards that go to people's houses. We did quite a bit of that too, just like Patty, in the more populated areas. And the ballot harvesting law, I think, was passed about 4 years ago, Patty, now 3-4 years ago. But the postal carrier, election officials can carry ballots, and then a caretaker or immediate family member. And so I understand on the nation how difficult that can be.
But it is still allowed for family members to bring ballots in for members of their family. So that restriction is not out there. So they can do that. But, when you live in a rural area, you have to plan. It's not like, oh, I run down the street and put in a PO box. You really have to plan when you're going to go in and pick up your mail. And people may only pick up their mail, once every couple weeks. Or I'm sure Crystal can talk more on that. It's not a daily event where you're going back and forth to your post office for a lot of people.
And I think Patty's right with working with your post office. We did the same thing. All of our main postmaster in Prescott, he got a hold of all of the other small post offices in the county and said, don't forward everything on to Phoenix, process them locally. And then I want you at 6:30 or depending on where it was, beat feet into the main office. And then we went over and picked them up. They kept them, processed them locally so that we could get them. I think a lot of the answer, because the post office struggles just like we do, is having that really good close contact with them and working with them, because I've found that they will work with us. We reach out and they'll really help doing things like that for us as well. So our mail goes to Phoenix also.
Hey, are there any more questions?
No, there aren't.
Okay. I want to ask a question. These are great information that's coming out through these questions. People are interested on ballots. Can you explain how ballots are designed and what the requirements are to print ballots in other languages? And also, when you have 5 people running, whose name appears first? Can you just explain how that works?
You want me to take that, Leslie? Yeah, ballot layout is kind of interesting. People don't realize, I don't think, like for a primary election, we'll have 600 different ballot styles. And that's because of the different political parties, the different races, if you're in the fire district or you're not in a fire district, or if you're in a city, not in a city. And then the names rotate, and we rotate in Arizona precinct to precinct. So if your name is first and we start in alphabetical, some of the cities do a drawing for their races to determine what the first rotation is going to be, whose name appears first. But for us, it's the candidate 1 will be first, let's say in Flagstaff precinct 1, candidate 2 will be first in Flagstaff precinct 2, and so on. Now in the partisan for the general election, it's the party that wins the governorship at the previous election or the president at the previous election goes first. So in Coconino County, for the president, Joe Biden's name was listed first and Donald Trump's would be second. Where in Yavapai, it would be the opposite. Donald Trump, and it stays first of the party. It doesn't rotate precinct by precinct. Now we're under the Voting Rights Act. We have not been Coconino County or the state of Arizona for Spanish, but we continue to print our ballots in Spanish because we feel there's a large enough number of people that would benefit. We want our voters to be informed. So we have, for our general election, since it's so full, we had a separate Spanish language ballot and a separate English. Normally what we like to do is do both on one ballot, but ballot space is of a premium as more and more ballot questions go on. Now for Crystal had mentioned that our voters in Coconino County that need language assistance in Navajo or the Diné language, they don't read probably the language, even though there is a written form of it. So with that, we do audio, and our touchscreen accessible equipment has language for Spanish and Navajo and English. So I hope that answered the question. It gets a little complicated, but some of our counties are covered for Spanish. I think Maricopa is, probably Santa Cruz.
Yuma.
Yuma, yes, Yuma. So.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
we always keep, even though we're not under pre-clearance, we always have our translator here so that she can answer questions if people call. And we get so few requests for the Spanish ballot, but we do everything we can to try to provide those. And Patty was talking about ballot space being that real estate on ballot is premium. And one of the laws that was just passed is now we have to add more language about Prop 105 regarding Prop 105 explanation. So that takes up that much more ballot real estate for us. And that's something that we battle. We don't object to making the ballots more clear, but our fear is the day we have to go to a two-page or three-page ballot and the confusion that could cost.
I have a question for the recorders. Is there any timeline that prevents the legislature from making changes way too close to the election date? Or is there a cutoff point beyond which they can't tinker with the system?
Yeah, the legislation effective dates go in, but yeah, they couldn't do anything, close to election. Everything's governed by statute. So I guess, what would you think tinkering?
Well, I guess what I was struck the first time I was in Arizona is I voted early voting and then things changed by the time the election rolled around. I mean, there were some candidates, I can't remember the particulars, but it just seemed like the ballot I had used for early voting was not quite matching what the actual situation was.
That was a presidential preference election.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and they drop out. And that's why a lot of your people
Oh.
have out in the presidential preference, wait till the last minute, because when the ballots are, we have to have ballots done by a certain time, get them to the printer so that we get them out, you know, in the statutorily required timeline. But between the time that they're programmed and the time that they get into your hands, that very
Okay.
a lot of times people are dropped off. That's where we get the late ballots a lot of times, because they're waiting to the very last minute to see who's going to drop off.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And that's something to keep track of. We have had legislation introduced, and thank goodness it did not go anywhere, that early ballots would have a different deadline, like 2 weeks prior to the election, they would have to be turned in. And so you'd essentially have 2 election days. So I think, I know I myself, I prefer to vote closer to election day because there may be information that comes out about a candidate or an issue that I didn't know. And if I had voted it the first day I got it, I maybe would have regretted how I voted. So.
Also, to add to the changes, it was HB 2794 was passed saying that only courts can change election-related dates and deadlines. So they did pass that in this last session.
Okay, Mary Ann, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, or express a concern. I'm no expert, but I do follow legislation pretty carefully, and I believe legislation takes effect 90 days after signed by the governor. So if a law is passed in May and signed by the governor, June, July, August, it could be law, which could impact election procedures. And I attended another league event. Katie Hobbs was speaking, and apparently things can occur even, you know, close to election time. Now, I hope I'm wrong about that, and perhaps you ladies have more specific examples, but I'm very concerned about changes that may still be coming next year.
Well, next year, you know, they'll be done. They have another legislative session, so they could do lots of damage if they want to, in my opinion. So, yeah, but I'm not familiar with any laws that changed in between. The courts have done things. Like I remember when ID to vote, it was the Prop 200. There was a court ruling that we would require ID to vote. And then there was another, I think the Ninth Circuit said, no, they put it on hold. So you don't have to show ID. And then the US Supreme Court overruled it. So courts can interfere or change dates in between on whenever court challenges go into effect. But I guess it could be possible. Leslie, do you agree that if the session went late, that they could have a law that would go in effect after the primary, but it would be in time for the general election?
Yes, absolutely. And it's 90 days from signing die, not from the governor signing. Yeah, so when they end session, it's 90 days there, unless there's an emergency clause, and then it goes into effect immediately. But there's generally very few of those that go into effect as soon as the governor signs. And so, yeah, we had stuff this last year we were watching to see if it was going to go through or not, because as session went on and on and on, we knew that 90 days would be right between the two elections. So it is possible. We just cross our fingers that we don't have that.
So I want to ask just maybe another question looking ahead to 2022 and beyond. And that is, what new practices or innovations would you like to put in place if there were no budget constraints to improve access and registration?
I want Patty's trailer. I would like to have it a little more, more mobile services. I would really like to have that. If there was, that's what I would have used that money for, if I would have had it, to get a trailer to go out before voter registration, especially to our rural communities, and then during the early voting period. That's always been a dream of mine. So we can help them register, and then we can help them come in, vote early in person, or just drop off their ballots, like Crystal was saying. So we are accessible to them a little more. I would really like to do that.
So can a citizen donate a trailer to the county?
They could.
Okay.
As far as I know,
Okay.
I'm not sure. I keep telling him I want a toy hauler, because then you have a ramp
Okay.
with the toy hauler for getting things. And it could be. I've got it all in my head. I've already figured out how it would look.
That's what we did.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Crystal, how about you? Practices or innovations, if there are no constraints on funding, that you think would improve access and registration?
I really love the idea that was mentioned earlier about the mobile stations out there. I think that would really generate a movement among those who feel they've been left out of the voting process, especially out there in the rural community. So if you live in the middle of nowhere, and this is like literally the middle of nowhere, you're like maybe 45 minutes to an hour from a main highway, and you travel by dirt road to your house. Just being able to have that accessibility through some of these voting, mobile voting vans or trailers or whatever have you, it does generate a sense of community and inclusion into these processes, which in turn would inspire others to, submit their vote who may have not voted in the past.
Patty, you want to add anything?
This isn't, if I had unlimited money,
Yes.
I would continue what we did in 2020. We didn't spend the entire $614,000. We ran out of things to spend it on. So main thing is to expand the number of people that we can employ to get out there, because the trailer doesn't get out there by itself, and maybe have more than one trailer because we are such a big county. And also we have one office on the Navajo Nation at Tuba City, but it would be nice to be able to maybe expand early voting sites at some of the other locations that could be staffed the entire time period, like Tuba City. Because even if we go out there with a trailer, we're only there one day, maybe a week, and people have to plan for it. And it would be nice to have, offices that could be staffed the entire time. So it takes people to run elections. So that's.
We just got a suggestion from one of the people participating that you start a GoFundMe fund for a trailer, and I guess probably for increased things. So have you thought of that as a possibility?
I think that might, I don't think we could do that as a government entity.
Okay, the government doesn't allow that. Okay.
Yeah. But I agree with Patty. Being able to have, Prescott Valley has gotten huge, and we would love to have an early voting site out there, but it's hard enough to get polling locations for a day or two or 3 days, actually, to have to get equipment there. But to ask somebody, gosh, can I rent this for 27 days of early voting? That's expensive if someone will even allow you to do that, because usually they have a place for rent, and if a renter comes up, that's who they would rather have in there. And like she said, it takes staffing, and I would like to have that money so that we can pay, especially those seasonal people, a little bit more. We can pay more to do a little bit better training, to have them in training longer. So yeah, not just the equipment, but the people and paying them a little better wage.
So just picking up on that and adding to that comment about the GoFundMe for the trailer, the person said, This is something the League of Women Voters could do. Start a GoFundMe. I don't know, we can explore that. But what about, you mentioned equipment, but you mentioned people power and getting out there and serving the rural communities. Can average citizens be part of the woman power, manpower to help improve access and registration in terms of how you're set up? What can we do?
Well, you guys already do quite a bit, the organizations that conduct voter drives. And in Nebraska, where I worked, we contracted with our local League of Women Voters and to do voter registration for us. And now I was in Lancaster County, which is the second largest county in Nebraska, the city of Lincoln. And we would have over 300 voter registration sites throughout the county that the League of Women Voters would staff for us. Now, this is back in the 80s, and we were paying $1.25 an hour to the league, but it was kind of a fundraiser for the league. But we found the league was an organization that was so fair and would take seriously the bipartisan nature of having people staff our voter registration. It was a wonderful partnership. And for the 13 years I was there, it worked really, really well. So.
And usually the League of Women Voters, because you are so involved, you are interested like this with all the changes. So when you're out there doing those drives, you have a good wealth of knowledge of what's the most current, how to fill out the forms, anytime things change, we try to reach out to the league and they reach out to us. Okay, what's just like you did. This is, I think, the third group I've talked to this month. Say, what's changed? What do we need to do to help? And it's a tremendous partnership.
Crystal, additional woman power, manpower to improve registration and access?
Yeah, I think so. Hopefully, that's something we're trying to inspire, just within our students to get more involved. I attended this this training or autumn training with the I think Northern Arizona Democrats. I think that's what they're called. And they hosted this training and invited myself and one student, she attended as well. So we're hoping to expand just more access to students to be more involved in some of these things. And our students are great. I mean, they're hungry, they're energetic, and they're young and can carry some of these things through. So, just using the low-hanging fruit resource that we have here, I think that would be just something we're trying to start now. And yes, it would help to have funding to pay them. Just like Patty and Leslie said, it would help to have funding to pay some of these people who are getting out there and not just on a voluntary basis, but be able to assist them with maybe some supplemental funding where they're sitting out there maybe up to 10 p.m. at night to get voters registered. So time is money, so I do agree with that. I appreciate all those comments and I'm learning a lot even just from being here in this talk. So just seeing what opportunities are out there within myself, and then expanding that to the students, making sure they're looking into some of these opportunities and learning to be a part of the education that we could put out there.
Yeah, we appreciate the participation. We only have a few minutes. Just wondering if any closing thoughts, anything you want to impart to our audience that you haven't had an opportunity to impart. This would be your opportunity to do that.
I just want to let everybody know we are all open. Our phones are open, our doors are open. If there's a question, especially if it sounds odd, which there's a lot of odd information, I'll say that, going out there, call and talk to us. We're always willing to explain. There's usually more to the story. I saw this, I heard you do that. Well, we do, but this is why that's done. Just go to the people who do the work and talk to them, not the next person on the Facebook feed. That's been very tough for us to battle the mis and the disinformation because it's so rampant. So just, we're there, call us, please. And Patty and I both have great staff. They're always willing to take calls and help people feel comfortable with what's happening in their county.
Yeah, I guess I would add, stay vigilant. Democracy's fragile. And right now, in my opinion, our democracy is under attack like it's never been, at least in my lifetime. And we need to speak out when we hear lies about elections and get involved in elections, work in the election field, be a poll worker. And so you can see firsthand how things are conducted. I think that's one of the best things that we can do is these attacks that they're making and claiming fraud, they're attacking the people in our counties, our communities. They're saying they're not honest, our family members, our neighbors. They're the ones that conduct the election. And it makes me so angry that people can throw lies around so carelessly, because if you repeat a lie, and every time a lie is repeated and not said it's a lie, more and more people will believe it. So thank you for the work you do. I truly appreciate it. And like Leslie said, we're here to help. So if you need anything, let us know.
Thank you.
I do have one thing. Robin, thank you. And I appreciate being invited to this and being a part of this. And even, just that extended invitation from the League of Women Voters to be a part of their board. I think there are many opportunities to be had here, not only now, but in the future with other Native voters and other Native American activists, and even not just activists, but advocates who are out there trying to get out the vote. And as you may have noticed with the last 2020 election, even though it was during the pandemic, a lot of Native voters turned out and helped turn the state of Arizona to certain properties of candidates that we think would benefit us as Native nations. And I think right now, Native voters are finally realizing that their voice does count. And just seeing what had happened in the past election, I think there's just more to build on in the next election. And that's really what I hope the message would be for these younger generations here within these Native American communities. And just having that open extension of, you're welcome to stop by your office, or if you need any information, just that open extended hand does really go a long way.
Thank you, Crystal. Well, I just want to say on behalf of the League of Women Voters in Northern Arizona that we are so honored to have you today, that we deeply appreciate your service and your commitment to voting, and we look forward to strengthening our partnership and making sure that the right to vote remains the right to vote, and that it is accessible to everybody who is eligible to vote. So thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We appreciate it. And this recording will be on our website in a couple of weeks. Leslie?
Okay, just want to say thank you, and let's do this more often.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Patty, Crystal.